On this show about the history of the Earth, the scientific view taught in the majority of schools is that the Earth is millions of years old, that humans evolved from apes. Well, no. I think the consensus of opinion now is that humans didn't evolve from apes, but humans evolved from lower species of humans, and apes evolved from apes. But there is another theory. The one espoused in the Bible, the one that lots of people poo-poo, wave their hands at. Just, excuse me a minute. Could you pay attention to what I'm doing?
I'm looking at the screen, man.
Okay, good.
Yeah. There should be one there, shouldn't there, really?
What?
I have to crick my head around and look at
Well, why don't you move it?
the wires.
What was that piece of paper you had just brought in?
Oh, it's the facts. James, I would like to say hello to everyone studying for exams in a week. From Vic.
Thank you, Vic.
Give us all a honk on the horn. You were the only one who lightens up endless evenings.
Okay, right, Vic, listen to this. Everybody else listen to it. We want to get serious now. Okay. There is another theory about evolution of man. That's the one espoused in the Bible. The one that a lot of people say, Adam and Eve, you were having a laugh. No. That apparently could be the true definition of man. We could have been created less than 10,000 years ago. Dr. Kent Hovind from Creation Science Evangelism in Florida is so confident about God's hand in creating our planet that he has posted a $250,000 reward for anyone who can scientifically prove the theory of evolution. Let's remember, after all, the theory of evolution is only a theory. Attempting to disprove Dr. Hovind's belief is Dr. Massimo Pigliucci, Associate Professor of Ecology and Evolution at the University in Tennessee. Dr. Hovind's website, by the way, is www.drdino.com. Was that Dr. Dino? As in dinosaur, I'm not sure.
D-I-N-O.
Yeah. Well, we can find out. Let me talk to Dr. Kent Hovind now. Hi. Hello to you. Dr. Hovind, can you hear me? Hang on just a minute, and he probably will. Hello, Dr. Hovind. Can you sort that out, Ash? And if go to a break, and if you give me this crap again, I'm going home. From the Creation Science Evangelism in Florida. What do you, hang on, just what?
I'm just making sure he's going to come up here.
Oh, right, okay.
I've got Dr. Kent here.
Yeah,
Kent
that's what I'm talking about, yeah. From the Creation Science Evangelism in Florida.
Yes.
Who is so
sure he's there.
positive and confident that God created us about 10,000 years ago, that he's offering a reward to anybody who can scientifically prove the theory of evolution. And if you go to his website, which is www.drdino.com, you can find out more about winning $250,000. Dr. Kent Hovind, good evening to you.
Yes, sir. It's good to be with you.
I'm sorry about the glitch we had before. I thought maybe Armageddon had already started, but obviously not.
Well, you know, according to the evolution theory, complex things happen automatically, so I'm really surprised the phone system, had a glitch at all. That kind of stuff ought to go smoothly.
Now, listen, how serious? I mean, because with Americans, with you people, you see, I never know whether you're just winding everybody up or you're actually serious about this.
Well, now, I would have to make a comment and say that the British humor is very difficult for me to understand. I was just over there in Ireland and North Ireland and Wales 2 months ago. And
do not judge those of us in this country by the Irish and the Welsh, please.
Well, I did enjoy. You have beautiful country over there.
That's like me coming to America and judging you all by the people from down south. Oh, that's where you come from, isn't it? Yeah.
You got a good point there. Okay. Well, I'm very serious. There is no evidence whatsoever for evolution above what we would call microevolution.
Tell me what. Listen, let's do it this way. Tell me what you believe and what you think were the origins of man.
I think God created all the basic kinds of animals in 6 days, just like he said he did in the Bible. And he predicted in the scriptures in Genesis chapter 1, he said the plants and animals are always going to bring forth after their kind. Dogs are going to have dogs, and roses are going to have roses, and that's all you're ever going to get. And that's all we've ever seen. Nobody's ever seen any kind of animal produce a different kind.
Now, just so that I can, for my own peace of mind, everybody listening, understand this more clearly, this is not something that is laughed about, these views, the views you hold, in America, the way we in this country may consider these to be the views of a crank. You are in earnest about this.
Oh, I'm not only in earnest, I'm in the vast majority. The vast majority of Americans, and I think people with common sense would say there had to be a designer. The universe is simply too complex.
Now, I was reading that 47% of Americans believe in Adam and Eve and the fact that God created Earth in 6 days.
Correct. That's according to the Gallup poll in '98, I believe.
Now, in the state of Kansas, the Kansas State Board of Education has now approved book lists for science classes that have been put together by Tom Willis of the Creation Science Association. Am I right?
Oh, yes. Tom Willis is a good friend of mine. I talked to him last week.
Okay. In Kansas, this is taught in schools as history.
Oh, it's taught in just about every state. There are places that teach creation in the public schools. There have been 2 states over here that passed laws to require creation to be taught, and the Supreme Court in one case and the 8th Circuit Court in the other case struck those laws down and said, no, you cannot require creation to be taught. They can teach it if they want, but you cannot make them teach it. So it is taught in schools all across the country. I speak in public schools all over the world.
But in Kansas, it is required. It has to be taught.
No. Well, in Kansas, what happened is the school board said, we're going to not require macroevolution to be taught because nobody's ever seen any evidence for it. The teachers could still teach it if they wanted. You know, there's nobody ever tried to ban evolution from the classroom that I'm aware of. But boy, the evolutionists jumped all over that. They got all excited, said, they're trying to take evolution out of the schools. All they did was say, Kansas State is not going to require discussions of macroevolution. The teachers could still do it if they wanted. Absolutely nothing to get excited about on the evolutionist part, but I think it was smokescreen. You know, they had to...
Okay, let's a little more history on this. Now, one famous creationist, Henry Morris, I'm sure you've heard of.
Oh, yeah, good friend of mine.
Now, he says that Noah took 2 juveniles each of 17,500 kinds of animals.
Oh, I have no idea how many kinds. That number sounds as good as any, but probably around 10 to 15 to 20,000. I don't know. Some people say there's only 8,000 basic kinds of animals. If I asked you to sit down and make a list of all the different kinds of animals...
But what I'm saying is every animal that Noah took aboard his ark, we are descended from.
No, we're only descended from Noah and his family.
No. What I'm saying is the 2 dogs, say 2 dogs that Noah took on his ark, all dogs are descended from those 2 dogs.
Evolution theory says all dogs are descended from a rock.
From a rock?
Isn't that what the theory teaches? 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth cooled down.
Yeah.
Developed a hard, rocky crust.
Yeah.
It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup. The soup came alive, learned to evolve, and the dogs came from a rock.
Or evolved from wolves or whatever, yeah.
No. Go back, look at the bigger picture. Evolution theory says dogs came from a rock.
All right, okay. The creationist theory says that all dogs came from the 2 dogs rescued by Noah.
There may have been more. I'm not sure if Noah took 7 of some kinds of animals and 2 of other. I wouldn't be dogmatic and say it was 2 dogs. There might have been 7.
How big was this flipping ark then?
I don't know. If Noah was bigger than us, his cubit, elbow to fingertip, would have been longer. All we know is the Bible says it was 300 cubits, and there are several different cubits around the world that have been used as standards. Using the small cubit, the Israeli or the Egyptian cubit, the Hebrew cubit, it would be 450 feet. Most people suspect the ark was something more like 500 or 525 feet long. That's about 2/3 the size of the Titanic.
And could you have got all these animals on something of that size?
Well, 2 of each kind, certainly. Do you think you can get dogs and bananas and people from a rock?
Well, I don't think you could get them from a rock, but certainly you could get them from I would have thought. I mean, I'm just, hey, listen, I'm a chat show host. What do I know about anything? But I would have thought that the evolutionary process where things are created as they go through time, metamorphosize into different things, seemed fairly logical to me when I was at school.
Well, see, the metamorphosizing that happens, the changing that happens, is always changes within the genetic code that already exists.
So what happened hang on, what about all the history? What about the fact we found these dinosaur fossils from millions of years ago? What about the great mammoths that we've found frozen as they stood in blocks of ice?
Oh, well, one topic at a time. There's no question dinosaurs have been found. I mean, thousands and thousands of dinosaur fossils have been found. I've got quite a few dinosaur bones here. My website is drdino.com, you know.
Yeah.
But the question, you had two statements together. You said, what about the dinosaur bones from millions of years ago?
Well, aren't they all from millions of years ago?
No. Dinosaurs were created along with the rest of the animals. They used to be called dragons. See, the word dinosaur was only made up in 1841 by Sir Richard Owen. I believe he was an Englishman, if I'm not mistaken. But
he was.
Yeah, and he made up the word dinosaur in 1841. So all throughout history, they're known as dragons. And there are thousands of stories from countries all over the world of people killing dragons. So I think they were probably exterminated by man throughout most of history.
What about, you don't believe that this great meteorite struck the planet and threw up this cloud of dust that put us in darkness for 6 months or something and killed everything off?
No, sir. That's a ridiculous theory.
Now, I read somewhere that some of your followers believed that there were dinosaurs on this Earth until maybe the 1890s.
Oh, maybe past that. There have been an awful lot of sightings of dinosaur-like creatures in this century. Somebody sent me an article today from New Guinea, from the newspaper in the capital city of New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, where there are numerous people who just last week reported sighting about a 20-foot-long creature that they said was a dinosaur, long neck, long tail. There have been probably 500 reports from New Guinea and from Indonesia of pterodactyls still living. I spoke in a public college a couple months ago, and it was English as a second language class, so everybody there was from other countries, and I spoke on dinosaurs that are still living. One lady raised her hand. She said, Mr. Hovind, I'm a medical doctor from Indonesia. I came to America to study English, and she said, I want you to know we do have those animals you're showing us in my country, in Indonesia. This was just 2 months ago. She told me this. So I think we've really been brainwashed into thinking dinosaurs lived millions of years ago. Yes, dinosaurs lived on the Earth, and there could be a few stragglers still alive. I wouldn't. Do you actually believe that there are, in some remote jungle somewhere on this planet, pterodactyls still flying around? They've been reported hundreds of times from Papua New Guinea and from Kenya, Africa. If you watch on my website, look on Seminar Part 3 about dinosaurs still living.
Let me just remind people who may like to go to the website while they're listening to us chat. It's www.drdino.com. Okay. Sorry. We're talking, by the way, if you just joined us, with Dr. Kent Hovind, who is Associate Professor of Ecology and he's coming on in a few minutes. You are a doctor from the Creation Science Evangelism Movement.
Yes, sir.
Right, okay. And you believe that what is stated in the Bible, the way that creation was put in the Bible, that's what happened?
Oh, absolutely, yes,
okay. Let me move on slightly and introduce my next guest, who I hope you will talk to as well. Dr. Massimo Pigliucci, and I think you've met him anyway before.
Oh, I debated him twice. I'd love to do it again.
Okay. Doctor, hi, how are you?
Hi, fine, thanks.
Good. I hope I got your name right. I probably didn't. Pigliucci?
Pretty close, yeah.
Okay.
Pretty close.
Now, you obviously think that what Kent Hovind is saying is a complete load of garbage.
Correct. That would be a succinct way to put it.
Now, he's offering, let me get this right, Kent, you're offering $250,000?
Yes, sir.
If this the evolution theory can be proved scientifically.
Right.
Right, and if it can't be proved...
I actually accepted Mr. Hovind's challenge during our first debate, and I submitted materials for him to consider. I still have to get an answer. That was several months ago.
Hey, Ken.
Yes, sir.
Has he not done it to your satisfaction?
what he gives, and he's got it on his website too, how that plants can produce, sometimes, normally a dicot plant produces 2 leaves. He has some that produce 1 and some that produce 3. And he says this is proof for evolution. Well, it's still a plant. This does not prove we all came from a rock. You need to reread my offer. My offer is not for what you presented at all. I want some evidence for evolution, and what you gave was a variation within the same kind of species. That's not evolution.
Now, hang on, let's listen, because I went to school and I assumed that we all came from, we came from prehistoric man. This planet, life was created on this planet because everything was right, and we came from low forms of life, and they evolved to get more and more, what would you call us now?
Complicated?
Complicated, probably. And I just took that as read, and the idea of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and everything in the Bible was just a rather nice little fairy tale. But now I'm talking to people, Dr. Massimo, that say that was wrong. What we were taught was wrong, and that you can't prove the theory of evolution.
Right. There are several things to be pointed out here. First of all, what do we mean by proving a scientific theory? First, Dr. Hovind should know that scientific theories are not a matter of proof or disproof. They're only a matter of reasonable explanations about the world that we accept until we have a better explanation. So every scientific theory or hypothesis is provisional. So it could be that one of these days, the theory of evolution is going to go the same way as, say, the Ptolemaic theory that puts the Earth at the center of the universe. That could be. I'm not saying that it cannot happen.
So are you telling me, Massimo, then, that Kent could be right and that we could all be descended from 2 original human beings?
What I'm saying is that the details or the general framework of the currently accepted theory of evolution, like any currently accepted theory, could change. And one of these days, we could have the textbooks in biology written in a different way because it turns out that a different theory is correct. One thing I'm pretty sure, however, it's not going to be Dr. Hovind's theory.
You're sure?
Yes.
Why? If you're so sure, why can't you prove it to Kent Hovind's satisfaction and win?
Because Kent Hovind doesn't allow anybody to prove anything. There is nothing that would prove Kent Hovind wrong, short of turning a banana into a human being under his very nose, which of course is completely ridiculous, and it's not the way biology actually works. So Mr. Hovind has set up his little challenge in a way that nobody ever can possibly meeting, and then he's turned that into a propaganda tool of his own. It's a very cheap trick, if you want. He probably doesn't even have the $250,000. If he does it, he knows that he's not going to get into anybody because he's the only and sole judge, and he puts the parameters for that challenge.
So, Kent, you're a bit of a shyster on the choir.
Well, I can put the same challenge to Mr. Hovind. I can offer Mr. Hovind $1 million if he can prove that the Ark existed, or if he can prove that we descended from Adam and Eve, and he's not going to be able to meet the challenge.
Well, a couple of points. First of all, you're either mistaken or deceiving people here. I am not the only judge. I'm not even a judge. I have 9 different scientists who are trained in all different branches of science. If you send some real evidence that you
who
think
decides what the real evidence is?
I'll send it to them. You send me the evidence.
I did. Did you send it?
You mean the plant producing 2 leaves instead of 3 instead of 2?
The question is, whatever I give you, which was the whole material that is on my website, did you actually send it to anybody, and can I see proof that you actually sent it to anybody?
I did not. I thought you were joking because that is so far.
I'm not. I'm perfectly serious.
If you're serious, then I'll send it to him.
Well, look, you're saying that I am joking, and you are the person who says that human beings originated 6,000 years ago from a couple of individuals that were put on earth from God. You are the one that is joking here.
Oh, I'm not joking at all. I think that's very serious. And you're right, I do not have $250,000, but a rich friend of mine does.
I thought
the money is in the bank. It is very safe. It's a legitimate offer.
Well, I would like then, if there is a legitimate offer and it's serious, that you take the copy down everything that is on my website and send it to these 9 people. Let me know who these 9 people are, because I need to have a proof that they actually done this and it's not just in your imagination.
I will send your website information. I have your website here.
Mm-hmm. Why did you think what Dr. Massimo had sent you was a joke? Why did you not take it seriously, Kent?
Okay, if you start with plants that produce 2 leaves, and through mutations you get plants that produce 3 or 1, How does that prove we all came from a rock?
Who says that we all came from a rock?
Evolution says that.
No, you say that evolution said that because,
bring
again,
me
you
your
want to put it,
textbook.
you want to make this whole thing into a joke. There's
is a
no
joke.
evolutionary biologist who says that animal or plant life comes from a rock.
Okay, you send me the biology textbook used at the University of Tennessee in your school.
Yeah.
I will mark the pages and lead you through a logical chain of events, just like we would do in a court of law, that says this book teaches we came from a rock, because it will say 4.6 billion years ago the Earth cooled down, and then it rained on the rocks and produced soup, organic soup, and the soup came alive and slowly evolved. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to...
For one thing, you're even out of date, because what you're referring to is idea of primordial soup, which is not even considered as the main contendant as an explanation for Derringer life. Second of all, even if you were correct, that theory does not talk about rocks originating organic compounds. It talks about the organic compounds originating into a water solution and catalyzed by energy.
Hang on, guys. Listen, let's remember that the majority of us out here don't understand this when you get too deep. What we basically are arguing about is whether the scientists, what were considered to be the true scientists, talking to us about evolution, the Neolithic, the prehistoric, and all the other things that we've just taken as, particularly since since all the dinosaur films that have been around.
Yeah.
We're taking these as a definite thing, and now we're finding out that 47% of Americans believe in creationism.
Right.
It's now being taught in school as a fact in many areas of America.
Right.
And this is...
the problem is that a lot of Americans also believe in the fact that Elvis is alive, and they also believe in flying saucers. So what?
But you see, this is a worry, because those of us who live in the very sophisticated United Kingdom are worried now that not only does America believe this, but also they've just voted in probably one of the thickest and stupidest men in the country as their next president.
I would agree with that statement.
So, you know, what hope is there for the world?
Not much. That's why we're trying here desperately to educate people about the nonsense that Mr. Hovind is spreading around.
But it
And
might
it's a
not.
hard job.
But it might not be nonsense. I mean, nobody so far is able to prove otherwise.
Okay, you cannot prove a negative. Right? This is the fundamental aspect. For example, let's say that you tell me that you believe in that somewhere in the universe there are unicorns. There are animals that look like horses and they have one big horn on top of their head.
Uh-huh.
And you said, prove me that that's not true. And I said, I cannot prove you that it's not true, because the only way to prove you that it's not true is to actually search the whole universe.
But hang on.
Okay?
No, it's easier.
Demonstrate.
Listen, we
Yeah.
can prove that man and dinosaurs lived on this earth hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years ago, by carbon dating. Surely, Kent...
By some kind of radioactive dating. It's actually not carbon dating, but yes, by some kind of radioactive dating. The problem, of course, is that Mr. Hovind will say, but I don't believe in radioactive decay.
But you can't say that, Ken, can you?
No, I would like you to do one thing, because I've debated Mr. Pigliucci twice. I would like you to limit it to one topic at a time. Otherwise, what will happen is, 5 or 6 things will be mentioned, and I only get to respond to one.
Okay, you have a go now. Listen, what I'm saying is that stuff has been dug up by the archaeologists that was here hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Okay, right there you need to stop. Many things are dug up by the archaeologists, but they don't have a date on them. You don't know that they're hundreds of millions of years ago. That date is assigned based on all sorts of different things. I cover on my website a long section on carbon dating, and I do believe in carbon dating. I understand it pretty well, and it doesn't work.
And, dinosaurs don't have anything to do with carbon dating. You should know that very well.
Oh, actually, dinosaur bones were dated several different places at less than... you need to read, let's see, Professor... 2 Russian scientists, I can't pronounce their name, had dinosaur bones carbon dated a couple years ago at 30,000 years old. They didn't tell them they were dinosaur bones.
That is absolute nonsense. Where was that published?
Let's see. There's a book called, by Eric von Fange, page 36, Noah to Abram, The Turbulent Years, it's called.
Oh, boy. Sounds like a very impressive scientific publication.
Oh, I can find the reference for you, but let's just take a few examples here. Carbon dating, if you think this works, carbon dating of mammoths, for instance, is frequently done because mammoths are found all over. From the U.S. Geological Professional paper, 862, the U.S. Government Printing Office. They show on page 30 where a baby Dima, the dehydrated mammoth that was found, it's in a Russian museum right now, was dated. One part of it was 40,000 years old, another part was 26,000. And the wood next to it and under the carcass was 9,000.
And that's very impressive. It's got nothing to do with dinosaurs.
Okay,
Carbon dating,
it does have to do with the fact
carbon dating cannot date anything that is older than a few tens of thousands of years.
I'm trying to illustrate the point.
When
it doesn't work.
65 million years. Therefore, no paleontologist has ever used carbon dating to date dinosaurs. It's just not the right tool, and you should know that.
You are missing the point. I pointed out that carbon dating from the same animal gives different dates.
You are pointing
Obviously,
out a completely irrelevant piece of information since it's not used for dinosaur dating.
Okay, let's go to potassium-argon dating.
Yes,
that
let's
is a
go
bigger
there.
date. Okay.
Sure.
Hawaiian lava has been frequently potassium-argon dated. Mm-hmm. If you look in the book by Dalrymple, I can't pronounce his name. It's Earth and Planetary Science. Earth and Planetary Science Letters, 6-47. 1801 Hawaiian lava was potassium-argon dated at 1.6 million years old. Well, they knew it's only 200. Mount Etna in Sicily, you're from Italy, Mount Etna erupted in 122 BC. The potassium-argon age given to the lava was 250,000 years.
This is all very interesting, but it
all shows it doesn't work.
As you know, we cannot check your sources. And the few times that I did check your sources, they turned out to be bogus. They can turn out to be either misinterpretations or misquotations of work published by somebody else.
Okay, why don't you get on my website? Everything's sourced on my website.
It's all on your website, but then I visited your website plenty of times. The problem is there are literally thousands of chemists, geochemists, and physicists who have worked on radioactive dating for lifetimes. And they think that they get it right. What makes you think that you got it right and everybody else got it wrong? Especially given that you don't have a degree in any of these disciplines.
If people are getting different dates from the same object, obviously something is wrong.
Yeah, but I think you're making that up.
Okay, Nature magazine, April 18th, 1970, page 226, they potassium-argon dated the KBS tuff at 212 million years old.
I hope that the listeners were listening to exactly what you were saying. 1970, you know what that is, right? That is pretty much the beginning of modern age radio dating. Therefore, probably there were mistakes made. Do you have any more recent source, say something from 99 or 2000, maybe this millennium?
Oh, certainly. Well, we can go on all day. When the moon rocks were brought back, again, 1969, 1970, carbon dating was invented in 1950. It had been out for 20 years.
Hang on, listen, let's not argue about this. Listen, what I want to know, fundamentals, right?
Yeah.
Did cavemen exist? Kent?
People live in caves today. Yes, people have always
lived in caves. Did cavemen exist, thousands of years ago?
Well, you'd have to define caveman. If you mean simply a man in a cave...
Did Neanderthal man ever exist?
Oh, Neanderthal man certainly existed. He was a human. They were humans deformed from diseases, arthritis, beriberi, pellagra, different diseases that deformed these guys. Yes, but they were 100% human.
But they lived before Noah and the flood?
No, they probably lived right after the flood. Would have been about 4,400 years ago when they lived.
Dr. Massimo? How do you argue against this?
Well, it's very difficult to argue against a bunch of nonsense. The question is, yes, almost all the paleontologists, in fact, all paleontologists that I've talked to, and all the paleontologists that are publishing on Neanderthals agree that not only they are Neanderthals did exist, the most recent evidence is that they were in fact a distinct species for humans, and certainly they existed much earlier than 6,000 years ago.
Certainly. Now, how can you be certain about that?
Because there are several ways of dating bones of Neanderthals, and every time that people have used those dating methods, they have come up with dates that are not only in agreement with each other, but they are much older than 6,000 years.
Hang on, before we get back on the dating thing, I mean, Dr. Massimo, do you think that the Neanderthal man could just have been a degenerate, deformed human being that was ostracized to live in caves?
No, it was, Neanderthal man was a separate species of humanoids, hominids, and there were several others before that. They were not on the direct line of descent of human beings, meaning that they were not our ancestors.
Who do you think our ancestors were then? Because this missing link that's always been spoken about and never been discovered.
Well, no, there are several so-called missing links that are no longer missing. There are several species that have been described that are likely to be on the direct line of descent of humans, or anyway are very close to the actual close link, intermediate link, and those are Homo habilis, there's Homo erectus. There are several of them, and all the way back to the Australopithecines. And I'm sure that Mr. Hovind will tell you that either they were all perfectly humans, or they were all perfectly chimpanzees.
Listen, guys, I've got to take a break for some commercials, and I'll come straight back to you. Don't go away. I'm talking at the moment with Dr. Kent Hovind, who is a creation scientist and believes that God created this planet, created man. He believes in Noah and the floods and everything else. And the interesting point of this discussion, I think, is that 47% of Americans believe this as well. Here's the most powerful country in the world with a new president who has not traveled much outside the United States and comes from the South, where this is taught as fact in many of their schools. We've also got on the air tonight Dr. Massimo Pigliucci, who is the Associate Professor of Ecology and Evolution at the University of Tennessee. And we're just trying to work out who's in the right, who's in the wrong. By the way, Kent Hovind has offered $250,000, $250,000 for anyone who can scientifically prove the theory of evolution. And he's on the line with me, and also Dr. Massimo Pigliucci, who is the Associate Professor of Ecology and Evolution at the University of Tennessee, and he believes in the theories of evolution. Dr. Kent Hovind, on the other hand, is offering $250,000 reward to anybody who can scientifically prove this theory. We're a little stuck in the debate about how you actually date the sort of things that prove where we come from. Let me just ask you both this question. How old do you think the planet is? Kent Hovind first.
Oh, I think it was created in 6 days, about 6,000 or 7,000 years ago.
You think it's 6,000 or 7,000 years old?
Sure.
Okay. Dr. Massimo?
Well, the best estimate that we have right now is 4.5 billion years, take or leave about 200 million years.
This is 4.5 billion years.
Right. And I would like to ask Mr. Hovind, what's his evidence other than the Bible that the Earth is 6,000 years old?
Oh, I think we could look at hundreds of lines of evidence. The moon is getting farther away.
One.
Okay, the moon is getting farther away from the Earth, about 2 to 3 inches a year. That means it used to be closer. Sure. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out. If you bring the moon back in closer, the tides start to get higher. And you only have to go back 1 billion years for the moon to be touching the Earth. Now, if you want it to be 4 billion years old, you have a serious problem with the scientific fact that the moon is leaving us, and it simply cannot be 4 billion years old like you want.
Gee, and I wonder, all those astronomers haven't noticed this thing. They
certainly have noticed.
Figured it out.
They've noticed many times. It's been published in many books. Get on the creationscience.com website, and you'll see all the details about the scientists who have said, wow, this is a problem, folks. We better work on this.
So hang on, let's just sort this out. I mean, if in fact, I didn't even know that the moon was getting further away from us. I mean, how long has it been getting further away from us?
It has been, what we know reasonably, the reasonable estimate is that the moon has been slowly, I'm not sure that the exact figure that Mr. Hovind quoted is correct. You should ask an astronomer, but it has been slowly inching away from us, and in fact, astronomers have figured out pretty much how this is going on, how long this is going on, and how what the effects were on the early Earth. And there is no reason to believe whatsoever that this thing has been going on for more than the age of Earth itself, which is about 4 billion years.
So what started moving away?
Yeah, it started moving away from at the beginning when the Earth-Moon system was actually formed.
How was it formed?
How was it formed?
Sure.
The current major theory, as far as I know, is actually the Moon was captured as a planetoid by the original Earth. So the Moon was probably formed as the rest of the solar system, and then it got into the Earth's orbit a little later on, not much later. We're talking about millions of years, not billions.
Well, I think you'd find the capture theory that you're proposing here has been disproven probably 30 years ago. The mathematics simply doesn't support it. It can't happen.
So, in your opinion, how did it form?
God created it.
Oh, God created. Put it down. Sorry, I forgot that you have the same exact answer for every single question. God did it.
Oh no! I love science. I taught science for years.
Really?
Sure, and I don't think there's any conflict between
What do you
science.
think is science, anyway?
Science, the word science means knowledge, things that we know, things that we can observe, things that we can test and demonstrate. Evolution is not part of science. Evolution is a religion that many people believe in. More people believe in, Chinese religions probably. There's more of them than us.
Now, you realize, of course, that people that so-called believe in evolution actually includes people that believe in all sorts of religions, Christianity included.
Oh, certainly. There's a wide range of
How do you
beliefs out there.
explain that?
Well, a lot of people mix their science with their religion. That's what you do. You're a good you're a good scientist when it comes to botany and understanding plants, but you've mixed in your religion of evolution that these plants came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago.
Yeah. Well,
that's simply not the force.
It seems to me that the real problem here is that we're having a discussion, say, in 2001, that we could have had about 3,000 years ago, and we would be on the same exact position. If we are having this discussion, say, in ancient Greece about 1000 BC or 500 BC, Mr. Hovind would be arguing that lightning and the thunderstorms are proof of the existence of Zeus.
I would not be arguing that at all.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the kind of argument that you're using now. You're saying, if they don't understand how something actually occurred, then it must have been God. That's essentially your argument.
No, you're setting up a straw man.
Really?
I understand how lightning occurs, okay?
Yeah, you do now, but 2,500 years ago, you wouldn't. You wouldn't have.
Just 30 years ago, you would have been saying dogmatically the Earth is 2.5 billion years old. That's what or 3.5. That's what the textbooks
I wouldn't have said anything dogmatically because it's not in the style of a scientist to say anything dogmatically. I started out this broadcast by saying that there is a possibility, of course, that the theory of evolution, like any other scientific theory, is incorrect. So I'm sorry, I don't subscribe to dogmatic.
Do you think, Dr. Massimo, then there is a chance that God did create this planet, and this planet was only created 6,000 years ago?
For that to be true, of course there is a chance, but for that to be true, then God would have had to put things in a way, order things and arrange things in a way to try to fool us to believe that the Earth is actually much older. So he would have had to put a bunch of fossils in the right place as if they actually fossilized millions of years ago. Now, sure, that is possible because by definition, God can do whatever he wants. He's omnipotent. But the question is, why? Why would he bother doing anything of the sort? Why would God try to trick us into thinking that the Earth is actually billions of years old instead of 6,000?
Okay,
That's a pretty sick-minded God, if you ask me.
Ken, here we go. Fossils prove, surely, that this planet is a lot older than 6,000 years.
Oh, no. Fossils prove there was a worldwide flood that destroyed this place because fossils don't form unless animals are buried quickly. You can find fossil beds all over the world with millions of animals buried in them, and they're buried in twisted, contorted positions, and just about everybody agrees they're in waterborne sediment. The vast majority of fossils are from floods. And nobody ever puts it together and says, hey, maybe it was just one big flood that did the whole thing.
It amazes me that Mr. Hovind thinks that nobody else has ever figured any of these objections before, and he's this first guy who doesn't know anything about science and figures out all these things, and everybody else is wrong. This is so arrogant that it is unbelievable.
Well, first place,
of course, people have studied fossils for decades and decades.
Sure.
People know how fossils form. They form under a variety of conditions, by the way, not only under flooding conditions.
I said the majority, okay? I said the majority of fossils.
No, not even the majority. They form buried, that's true. But the burying system process is not necessarily a flood. In fact, I'm pretty sure there are few fossils that have been demonstrated to actually be the result of a flood. And certainly not of floods that occurred simultaneously, and not of floods that occurred 6,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, whenever the Noah's flood actually is supposed to be occurred.
Okay, you're not far from Crossville, Tennessee. You need to go over to Crossville, Tennessee, and go to the coal mine, which is right there, where they have uncovered hundreds of petrified trees that are standing up. Yeah. They're running through all these different layers of rock that you say are different ages. I mean, it's right there in your back door. So don't tell me you know these layers are different ages. You simply do not know that. Go to Crossville, Tennessee. I'll call up the name of the mine in a second here.
Oh, don't worry. I got there, and in fact, I visited. I also asked my colleagues in geology if there is any problem whatsoever with these upright trees, and they said no. We've known about this phenomenon all over the world since a long time. There is no reason to revise geological theories according to that. This is the problem with creationism.
You didn't give me their answer. I want to know.
Hang on, I'm just interested. You're saying that there are fossilized trees that are standing upright.
There's pictures on the website.
Okay, that are going through different stratas of time.
According to the evolutionists, they're different stratas of time. According to me, they're not. They were all. See, that proves the layers were deposited quickly in a flood.
But Massimo, tell me, I mean, surely doesn't this prove something?
No, it doesn't. What's happening here is that there are a variety of geological phenomena that makes things a little more complicated for Mr. Hovind than he would like. For example, you could pick even a better example than the standing trees. He could tell you that there are some geological strata that have been dated to be younger than other strata that are in fact on top of them. And that doesn't make any sense according to geological theory until you realize that in fact the Earth hasn't been standing by waiting for us to look at these fossils or these strata. These things have been rearranged in a variety of ways, including actual turning over of entire sets of strata so that you have that kind of pattern. But you can reconstruct those movements simply because, as I said, you can date these things. And you can figure out from the surrounding geological strata what actually has happened. These things have been turned over. And the same goes for the trees. They've been changed, the position changes because the Earth moves. It's a very dynamic planet. So there is no problem. I mean, this is, again, this is a real straw man. Not like the one that I was accused of bringing up before.
Okay, all you need to do, I mean, if you want to make up stories about how the Earth has moved and arranged these trees running through different layers...
I'm not making up stories.
You certainly are making up stories. This is baloney. Okay. Now, there are several layers of coal that run through your area there in Knoxville. And if you go to the Kettles Mine, K-E-T-T-L-E-S, Kettles
Mine...
Mine...
I know exactly. I told you, I've been there.
Okay, well then you find layers of coal that they date at one age. You dig down 30 feet and find another layer of coal that's dated at a much older age. Mm-hmm. Then you move over a little ways and you find a petrified tree connecting the two layers of coal. It did not form. Those layers all formed within a few weeks or months of each other. And the Bible says the world was destroyed by a flood. And a flood will automatically sort things. Go get a jar of dirt and put some water in it and shake it up and set it down. In a few seconds, it'll settle into layers right in your hand. Yeah. The layers form because of Noah's flood. But some people don't like the idea of God judging the world.
Why have we never found Noah's Ark?
I don't know that a wooden boat could last 4,400 years. What difference would that make? There are 270 surviving flood legends from countries all over the world. Why do these different countries that have no contact with each other all have a similar legend of a flood?
What about...
That's actually pretty simple to explain. And anthropology, again, contrary to what you think, anthropologists actually have asked these kind of questions before, and they can come up with very reasonable solutions. It turns out, actually, the situation is not that simple. It's not that a lot of cultures across the globe have flood myths which seem to confirm a unique event that occurred a certain amount of time ago. What happens, actually, is that there is a variety of these myths. And lo and behold, all the cultures that have these myths are actually cultures that live in nearby large rivers. Well, that really doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that those cultures actually did experience floods. Of course, they were not worldwide floods, they were local floods. And the counterproof of this is that there are plenty of cultures that don't have these myths, and those are cultures that actually have not lived nearby areas that are floodable. How do you explain that? How is it that so many cultures, hundreds of cultures, don't have a flood myth, a universal flood myth?
Well, how many cultures don't live near water? I mean, come on, everybody lives near water. That's common sense.
It's not just water. It's not just water. It's about water that situations in an area in which you can have floods, large floods that kill people. Not everybody lives in those conditions. And again, there is a fact that you cannot explain. There is a fact of hundreds of cultures not having that myth. How do you explain that?
Oh, I'm sure there are countries today that don't have computers. What does that prove? Computers don't exist?
No, that is a complete non sequitur. It doesn't have anything to do with what I said. My question is, if there was a universal flood, you would expect, and you said yourself so 5 minutes ago, many cultures across the world to actually have that kind of mythology, because in fact it wasn't a mythology, it was a recollection, a dim recollection of a real event. So how do you explain the fact that hundreds of cultures don't have it?
Well, they forgot. People forgot. They forgot the value of pi for a long time.
Listen, guys, before we get, can I ask another question? What about what about the ice ages, which I thought were fairly well documented and dated? I mean, where do the ice ages fit into the theory of creationism?
Well, I think if the world was totally flooded by water, that's going to greatly upset the weather patterns for hundreds of years to come, especially as the flood water goes down. The Bible says in Psalm 104, the mountains arose and the valleys sank down and the water rushed off into the low places. And today the earth is 70% underwater. I mean, England is an island because there's a lot of water out there. There's enough water in the oceans right now to cover the Earth about 1.5 miles deep. There's plenty of water to flood the world. And so as this water rushed off...
You're not answering the question.
I'm getting there. It carved features like Grand Canyon very quickly as this water rushed off. Then the ground's going to have to dry out. So the climate would be really screwed up for probably a few hundred years, and you would have ice ages coming and going for a few hundred years after this flood.
But I thought ice ages took thousands of years to come in and go out.
Yeah.
They do not. I was just up in Anchorage, Alaska, where the glaciers advance and retreat much faster than they ever dreamed. You know, you get a warm season and it melts way back, and then you get a cold season.
Oh,
and
yeah, way back, a few meters away.
Listen, guys, I'm going to take a news break at the top of the hour. Would you like to come back afterwards and take some calls from our listeners?
I'll be glad to.
Pleasure.
Okay, one last thing. This is to Kent Hovind. I can think about this during the news.
Sure.
I heard from one of my funny priests who call me from time to time that Armageddon is going to happen. It's written in the Bible, and it looks... everything is pointing to it happening fairly soon. Do you believe that, Kent?
Oh, I wouldn't put a date, but I think, yes, it's coming pretty soon.
And do you think there's anything we could do to avoid this or not?
Well, I think you ought to give your heart to the Lord and get saved. The Bible says God's children are going to be taken out of here, so you don't have to worry about it. I'm going to heaven. I'm not going there to Armageddon.
And how does one do this? And why aren't we all able to do it without any worry?
Well, everybody could ask Jesus to come into their heart and save them. I did 30 years ago as a high school teenager, 16 years old. I asked the Lord to forgive me and save my soul, and, well, he did. He's made a new person out of me. He's still working on a few areas. I won't tell you what they are, but he's in there working.
I mean, I occasionally ask for this myself, but I've never seemed to get a reply yet.
Well, read Romans chapter 10 and verse 13. God promised anyone that would call upon the name of the Lord should be saved. He promised he'd save those who would ask.
We'll come back after the news. Thank you both very much indeed. You're listening to the James Oil Radio Show on TalkSport. And your calls, 08700 40 50 60. That's the number, and emails after the news break. Dr. Kent Hovind is a creation scientist. He believes that the planet is no more than 6,000 years old, and God created the planet as it said in the Bible. And remember, 47% of Americans believe that as well. In some schools, this is taught as a fact. And we also have Dr. Massimo Pigliucci, who is on, and he, of course, is an evolutionist. He believes that the planet's about 44 billion years old, and believes in the theory of evolution. And we're getting stuck and bogged down, if you like, on how you date things. But the interesting thing, Dr. Massimo, I'll come to you. The interesting thing I find is that whatever you say, when opposed by somebody like Kent, who's going to say, listen, it's in the Bible, God did it, that's the end of the argument.
Right, you're quite correct. And that is exactly what makes creation science an oxymoron. I mean, you can't do creation science because ultimately, whenever you have a problem, you go back to the Bible and you say, well, this is the Word of God, so it must be true. Well, that's not the way science works. Science works by evidence and hypotheses that are tested.
Yeah. Okay, I want to actually stir it up slightly more now for both of you.
Oh, sure.
I want to bring, and I'm just looking on my computer screen here. I see we have a Dr. Majid from London in who wants to throw in the Muslim creationist idea. Dr. Majid, hi.
Hi.
You're on the air.
Yes.
Tell me what your views are.
Yeah. As a Muslim believer and campaigner for the creation, I thought it would be useful to make a few comments about the whole subject. Obviously, we share almost fully with Dr. Kent Hovind's idea. It's in our holy book, Al-Quran. It's mentioned clearly man has been made directly by God from sand, be and is being, and animal came, man, dog to dog, elephant to elephant, you name it. The Muslim in Britain, 2 British million Muslim, and the Muslim in the world, about 1,400 million Muslim, all believers believe in the creation. So we have 100% believe in the creation, and these are divine facts in Judaism, in Bible, and in Islam. We're only talking about this nonsense theory called Darwin theory. We have got all evidence all divine data that God has made directly man straight away, be and is being. And there is no evidence for all this theory which people are bringing to destroy the concept of God and to destroy the concept of the Creator. As Dr. Kent has been saying, designer, we see the evidence. I'm a medical doctor. I saw the evidence in my medical study and biology and physiology. Astronomists, they see the evidence and they believe in God Creator. Zoologists, they believe the same. So we all, if the American 47%, the Muslim 1,400 million Muslim, 99 to 100% believe in the issue, in the creation. And God created 6 days, and Noah Ark also is illustrated in the Holy Book Al-Quran.
So why do you and the Christians fall out all the time then?
No, what do you mean fall out?
Well, you're always, the Muslims and the Christians are always killing each other.
No, you see, you bring in politics here, aren't you?
Yes.
We're talking, I'm working with hundreds with Christian organizations here in Britain for chastity, for morality, for family, against abortion, against euthanasia. I work in the United Nations I bring Muslim nation. I go to United Nations, bring Muslim delegate with a Christian delegate. We're working on a lot of issues together, but we need to expand the work and to understand each other more. Unfortunately, the past and the colonialism and the political thing has been affecting the image, but we need to work together. And if Muslims are awake, they should take the lead in the creation, because 1,400 million Muslims believe strongly. It's part of our worship. When we pray, God the Creator, straight away it's blasphemous in our religion to believe in a crazy idea, accidental universe, and all this evolution nonsense.
Hang on then, Doctor. Let me go back to Dr. Massimo Pigliucci. Listen, Doctor, I thought for a few moments that everybody would be. I didn't realize we were going to go quite this far, but you're blasphemous.
I guess so. Well, the problem that the question I would like to ask your listeners is, what this has got to do with science? The fact that millions of people believe one thing or another is completely irrelevant to what science is about. I mean, if we were having, again, this debate, let's say, a few hundred years ago, the overwhelming majority of the population on Earth would believe that the Earth is the center of the universe. Well, they were wrong. Science is not done by majority opinion. It doesn't matter how strongly one believes one thing or another. It's got nothing to do with the facts or with reasonable ways to interpret the facts.
They all believed the planet was flat, too.
Right. They all, exactly. At one point in time, they believe all sorts of nonsense, and we know better now. Now, the question also is, I would like to question the listeners' figures. The listeners said that there are so many billions of Muslims in the world, which is true. I would like to question that all of them, 99, 98% or 100%, believe exactly what he believes. By the same token, there are almost as many hundreds of millions of Christians, and they would all believe what Mr. Hovind says, and I can guarantee you that they don't. I have a lot of friends who are Christians and a few friends who are Muslims, and they don't believe this nonsense. They are religious nevertheless. There are many different ways of being religious, and of course, if you disagree with a particular version of religion, you are, heathen, and you're going to go to hell and all that stuff. The problem is that, both Mr. Hovind and your listeners are going to go to each other's hell because they don't believe in each other's religion. But what's that got to do with science?
Let's get Kent's view.
Just a minute. Can I get
my
2 cents in here? He's arguing out of both sides of his mouth. If you go back and replay the tape of this program, I think you'll find several times throughout the last hour, Dr. Pigliucci did appeal to majority opinion. All scientists believe in evolution, was statements like that he made.
That is
so now
opinion.
He's saying you can't go by majority opinion here, but if 20 minutes ago he was saying you do go by majority opinion.
Now,
you go back and replay the tape.
You're obviously either trying to deceive the public on purpose, or you don't understand. There's a completely different version of what I just said. I said you cannot go by majority opinion, period, and that's first. When I said that the majority of the scientists agree on something, that means the majority of people that actually have worked on that subject. So this is not just a random sample of the population. It's got nothing to do with the majority opinion because scientists are not the majority anywhere, okay? It's a matter of the people that actually have the expertise to look at these things. I would like,
couple
since
things.
you don't believe in expertise, obviously, I would like you, the next time that you have to go to a doctor, or the next time you have to go to, say, have an operation of some sort, I would like to ask you to follow your own precepts and ask the majority of the world population how that operation should actually be carried out instead of your surgeon, because after all, your surgeon is as incompetent as anybody else.
Well, the doctor that just called is a scientist.
He's on the line
No,
now.
he's a doctor, not a scientist. There's a
He's a doctor, not a scientist. No.
Hello, I'm medical doctor, sorry.
By your definition, Dr. Pigliucci, the only people who are scientists are those who believe in evolution.
No, that's not correct.
That's exactly what you're trying to imply. Look, if you went to
People
the
that are scientists are people who get legitimate degrees through a lot of hard work in a particular discipline, and that can
Okay,
be
the doctor-
biology or it can be chemistry or physics.
Okay, the doctor that just called in, that's on the line, what's his last name?
Dr. Majid.
Dr. Majid, Katmi, my surname Katmi. I'm a medical doctor for 30 years here in Britain, and I'm involved with the campaign for the creation here in Britain because I find the evidence overwhelming. But here I'm not bringing as such, I'm not scientist in the detail about evolution, but I'm bringing the Islamic perspective, which is missing from the media. People do not know. Unfortunately, a lot of Muslims do not stand up and speak up. This is a problem I'm facing. I thought our listeners should know that 2 million British Muslims, 1,400 million Muslims, they read it every day in the prayer, in the Holy Book, Al-Quran. God, creator, designer, straight away on the spot.
Yeah, but
in a
Dr.
second.
Majid, how many of them actually believe what they're saying?
Well, this is difficult to put statistic on it now. All Muslim believer, you cannot be a believer if you don't believe in the creation. All Muslim who go to the mosque and practice Islam, I agree there could be the odd Muslim who are secular, who are ignorant about their religion, and you could be in touch with them, and they could be in touch with you.
So hang on, you're a medical doctor, you've worked for 30 years in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
By the way, celebrating our 200 years as a United Kingdom yesterday. You believe without any shadow of doubt whatsoever that God created this planet
Of
in
course.
6 days and that
Of
we
course.
are all descended from Adam and Eve.
Of course, you don't need to look at me. You go and read astronomists. I have book by top scientists, astronomists.
All right, listen
And
to
the
me,
world
listen, all
are
right.
saying there's a God creator.
Hang on. Listen to this. This is an email I've got here from Asit in Birmingham, who says, if Adam and Eve's story was true, now listen to me, guys, then how come we have all the different races of today? Surely only one race would exist. Otherwise, some kind of evolution must have occurred to make the black man different than the white.
It's in our holy book, Al-Quran. God created Adam, after that Eve, the companion. Then he made us, according to Quran, into different tribes and races with different language and color, that we know each other and we will be all human as one family. This is in our holy book, made us races and tribes and different color and different language. I cannot see any complication in that, and God is able to do everything.
Okay.
But the question is, why is it that a holy book of any religion should count as evidence in a scientific question? That's what I don't understand.
Oh, you have a good point, and that doesn't necessarily have to. And I don't think I would not take the Bible as being the only evidence for creation. I think our doctor on the phone would tell you, after studying the human body, you would say, this is incredibly complicated. It just simply had to be designed. Now, who was the designer? Was it Allah or Buddha or Jehovah? You know, we can get into disagreements about who the designer was.
Yes.
And that's why we have different religions. But the
Right.
fact is, there must have been a designer. It's just too complicated.
It is not a fact. The only fact is that you don't understand, or I don't understand, how a complicated thing like a human being comes together. That's all. It's simply an argument from ignorance. And as I said before, if we were having these arguments 2,000 years ago, you would be arguing the same way about thunderbolts or lightning. The same thing.
If you
Something
were
that you
making-
don't understand, you think it's too complicated, and you call God.
No,
Sorry,
if
but
you were
that's a
making this
cop-out.
argument.
That's a cop-out.
In Egypt, 3,000 years ago, they were teaching life evolved from the slime along the side of the Nile River.
Really.
There's been various different forms of evolution taught all through history. Darwin certainly didn't originate the theory. I think it's an attempt to run from the obvious. There must have been a designer, because complex things don't happen. Nobody in all of human history has...
Have you ever
never
heard of a
observed-
thing called complexity theory?
Oh, yes, but listen, nobody's ever observed a dog produce a non-dog. And yet you want me to pay, to have your salary paid, to teach the kids that dogs came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. Well, that's just silly. You can believe that if you want.
What is silly is, again, somebody who pretends to know better than people who actually have spent their life working on these things, and who actually doesn't understand the arguments themselves.
But hang on, listen, we're stuck still on this on this problem of, can it be proved without a shadow of doubt that the dinosaurs lived, I don't know, 1 million years ago or whatever it was?
Wait, okay, let me answer that in a way that would be making Mr. Hovind very happy. No, it cannot, nothing, or very few things, let me put it this way, can be proved beyond a shadow of doubt, as you said a minute ago.
I mean, Kent Hovind says that there are still, in certain parts of this planet, dinosaurs living today.
And I would really like Mr. Hovind to bring me one. Not simply a testimony of somebody who said that has seen a dinosaur, because I can bring Mr. Hovind as many testimonies of people that said that they've seen Elvis alive. What I want is a real dinosaur. If they are around the Earth, somebody's got to find them. This is a pretty small planet after all.
Oh, and I want you to bring me a real missing link that proves that any animal produced a different kind of animal.
Go into any paleontological museum and you find.
I go to many of them. I go debate at these universities. There is no evidence.
You don't observe what you're looking at.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Take another caller, both. This is Mary. She's calling us from London. Hi, Mary. You're on the air on the James Whale Show. Hello.
Hello. Good evening, James, and good evening, doctors and Ash. My name is Mary. I'm not a doctor. I'm not campaigning for anything. And I must hand it to you, James. You've invited some extraordinary guests in lately, and it really gets fascinating. If not a little technical at times, but keep asking those awkward questions.
And what was your question, Mary?
Okay, I've got 2 points, right? One is, at what point do the doctors feel that they meet on common ground within the argument, if any? And number two, what do they make of something like an alternative genetic makeup theory, i.e. the shapeshifters?
Okay.
Best seasonal greetings to Melinda, please, James.
Thank you, Mary. I don't. Do either of you believe in these shape-shifting aliens we've been talking about recently? No.
I do not. No, sir.
Okay.
Now they agree on something.
Good. Okay. And that's something you agree on, so that's both your questions answered, Mary. Thank you. Mick is a trucker listening to us at the moment. He's driving. He's on the M6 motorway. Hi, Mick. You're on the air.
Yeah, hello there, James. I'd just like to ask the religious guy a question that's been puzzling me. Who made God?
Well, God has always existed, and the question of who made God would, of course, assume that God is locked into time, space, and matter like we are.
So what you're saying is God evolved. So if God evolved, then that means everything evolved.
I didn't say that at all. I said God has always existed.
Yeah, but who made him?
Nobody made him. He's eternal. He's the
but where did he come from then? He must have come from somewhere, and if he wasn't made, he must have evolved. So there's your evolution.
No, you're misunderstanding. Even the question or the phrase "come from" indicates time, and God is outside of time. I don't think the human mind can comprehend the infinite God. If we would, he certainly would not be worth worshiping.
Santa, how do you know that?
Yeah, but I don't. I take that on faith. Now, both of our views, what many people don't understand is both creation and evolution have to be taken on faith. You have to believe, but the difference is the evolution religion is tax supported. All the taxpayers paid for one religion to be taught in the schools. Totally unfair.
So where do all the other religions come into it then? I mean, is there the one religion, or is there a lot, or is there a lot of gods that evolved all over the place, or is there like an infinity of gods just out there before time then?
I believe there's only one God. There are many false people who would claim to be God. We got them running around England right now claiming to be Jesus, or he's claiming to be God. Got them running around America too. But no, they're not. There is only
really
one
what you're saying is you don't know where God came from.
Oh, no, nobody does. But I'm not asking.
So hang on, did God create the universe as well? I mean, not just this planet, but did he create all the other planets, all the stars, and everything that's out there?
Oh, I believe, yes, sir, absolutely.
And do you think there are beings on other planets?
I do not. I don't know that. I just personally, there's no evidence for it. That would be arguing from the negative.
And it's never been written about in the Bible.
No,
that means...
what Dr. Pigliucci mentioned, 30 minutes ago was you couldn't prove the non-existence of something, for instance. Well, I can't prove the non-existence of aliens or other beings on other planets, but it's outside. That's outside the realm of science. So far, the scientific evidence tells us what we've observed, what we've tested, what we've seen is the only place we have life is right here. Now, if you want to believe there's someplace else, you just go ahead and believe that. But you just stepped outside of science and went into metaphysics.
Okay. Mick, thank you very much indeed for calling us. Now, listen, guys, how are we getting any closer to this? I mean, on the one hand, Dr. Pigliucci, you can't argue with Kent in a way, can you? Really? Because you don't believe in the sort of God, the Bible, religion, everything else. You believe in the hard scientific facts that you find.
Hold on a second. You're right that I cannot argue with Hovind, and in fact, I'm not arguing trying to convince Hovind of anything. I know that that's impossible. I'm simply trying to argue so that your listeners will actually have at least a part of a reasonable attitude, worldview presented to them. Now, the thing is, no, I cannot argue with Hovind because he believes into something and with no evidence whatsoever, and you cannot argue against belief. And everybody has the right to believe whatever they want to believe. It is not true that, however, my position is due to the fact that I don't believe in a God, because there's plenty of my colleagues who do believe in a God. In fact, many of them believe in the same Christian God that Mr. Hovind believes in. And they accept evolution as the most reasonable explanation available today for the diversity of life on Earth.
But how can they, if they believe in God, how can they believe that when the Bible tells us?
Well, because they believe that the Bible needs to be interpreted in a metaphorical sense and not literally as Mr. Hovind is doing. And once you get out of the literal interpretation of the Bible, then you have a heck of a lot of more possibilities. And one of them is, for example, there are many people who believe that, yes, God did start things out originally at the beginning of the universe, and then he created the laws of physics and of biology, and that's the way the universe has been going ever since. Well, that's a position that I cannot argue against. I don't know that it's true or not. I don't think it is true, but I don't know. I couldn't possibly argue against it. And it certainly is a position that doesn't go against any known facts or laws of physics or science in general.
But hang on, Kent, let me ask you this. Do you not think that the Bible, which has been interpreted through time by man, should be interpreted and perhaps not taken literally? Because it was written by people a couple of thousand years ago who would interpret things happening on the planet then in a completely different way to the way we would now.
Well, I think if you would stick, like, for instance, with the King James Version, you would find it hasn't been interpreted by millions of people. It's just been translated directly from the Textus Receptus, from the 5,000 known copies of the original language. And no, it's not. I think your premise is wrong to say that it's been interpreted by a bunch of folks. I mean, I can pick up a copy and read it today, the same thing they were reading 300 years ago,
of course,
and come to the same conclusions.
Mr. Hovind is completely ignoring the fact that there is a field of study that is concerned biblical archaeology and biblical interpretation, from which, for example, it is pretty clear that the Bible was written over a long period of time by a variety of different authors.
I agree.
And that there are plenty of statements inside the Bible that are internal contradictions precisely because they were written by different people.
Okay, I'd like you to show me one of these contradictions sometime.
Oh, there's a whole book. I can give you references of whole books.
I can give you references that refute all of them too. But see, you're dealing with, we're to get off topic here. Mr. Pigliucci says, he likes to go with the laws of biology. Well, the laws of biology says, the law of biogenesis, life only begets life. Living things don't come from non-living things. Reddy and Pasteur proved that in the last few hundred years. And yet he believes, if you could ever get him to be honest about it, he has to believe we all came from a rock. So somewhere along the line, if you won't dodge this topic, he will have to admit he believes in spontaneous generation.
Hang on. This is this we all came from a rock is a little far-fetched, isn't it, Ken, really? When you know as well as I do that what we came from was all kinds of different bacteria that grew because the heat, the water, the oxygen or whatever was in the right amounts for bacteria to start growing. These bacteria then evolved into slightly higher forms of life that then evolved into even higher forms of life.
Well, now, hold it. You've glossed over a very serious problem. Where did these bacteria come from? if you would ever stop and analyze...
Massimo, it's over to you.
Okay. One could give two answers, right? Which in fact are the two answers that are being considered now by scientists. A few scientists, not many, but a few scientists will give the answer to this question of where did the bacteria come from. The same kind of answer that Mr. Hovind has given us a minute ago about where did God come from. The answer is they've always been around. They're being transported from planet to planet through by meteorites and comets. There are people that actually seriously consider this as a possibility. I am personally not convinced that there is enough of evidence. It is true that you can find a lot of complex organic molecules in meteorites and in comets and in interstellar space. So that's a fact, which needs to be explained. I don't know if that's got anything to do with the origin of life on Earth or not. There are some people that will believe that it does. In which case, the answer would be, well, they came from someone else, and they did not originate on Earth.
That doesn't answer the question.
However, let me finish. The second possibility is, in fact, that there was... Sorry. Go ahead.
All that does is beg the question: how did it get started out there?
Right.
Nobody's ever
which is the same kind of begging question that you refused to answer a minute ago about God.
But could God have created it out there, and therefore God did create everything, but not quite as literally as it was written in the Bible?
You're just postponing the problem. Life had to get started somehow, someplace.
But couldn't it have started out, couldn't God have said, I'm going to create life, and here's a few bacteria to start it out, wham, they're on the planet?
Well, couldn't he have done it right here? Sure.
Yes.
I mean, but then you know, men writing a couple of thousand years ago couldn't have understood that, so therefore they wrote it down in a nice little story.
You're assuming that they were ignorant and you're smarter than they were. Mr. Pigliucci assumes that all the time in his material. He assumes ancient man is dumb.
Mr. Hovind is making the usual mistake of confounding intelligence with knowledge.
No, I'm not.
It's not true. You just said that I make the assumption that these people were ignorant and stupid, not as intelligent as we are. No, actually, I think that intelligence in human beings has not changed that much since Neanderthal times, and as our host has already pointed out, the recent elections in the United States have proven that beyond reasonable doubt, I think. Our level of intelligence is pretty much the same, but our level of knowledge is certainly not. And yes, there is no question that we know a lot more about the universe and about natural laws than anybody that was living 3,000 or 4,000 years ago.
Okay, let me just reiterate for those of you joining us at the moment, welcome to the James Well radio show tonight. We're talking about where we came from. One of the reasons we're talking about it is because I found something the other day that made me think, and that is that 47% of the United States, people living in the United States, believe in creation. I'm not sure whether the new president of the United States does or doesn't. In fact, I'm pretty sure that if you asked him what he thought about creation, he probably wouldn't understand the question. But I think that's slightly worrying. In certain schools, creationism, the fact that we came from Adam and Eve, is taught as a fact. Although, Kent, I think you'd have to agree that apart from the Bible, it isn't proven either that this is a fact, any more than the theory of evolution is.
That's my point. Neither can be proven to be a fact, so why do I have to pay for Mr. Pigliucci's religion to be taught in the schools? If he wants to believe we came from a rock, that's perfectly fine, but that's not science.
But do you want to see kids in schools taught only that we came from Adam and Eve and not given the possible facts about history, geology, and everything else?
Oh, I think kids should be given the facts of history and geology. The facts from geology are those layers had to be deposited rapidly because we find petrified trees standing straight up running through all the layers. So don't tell me that the layers formed separately over millions of years. That's a fact from geology.
Ken, doesn't it worry you, Ken, slightly that some of these people, particularly in the southern states of America, who believe the Bible absolutely, literally, who are prepared to kill or be killed for their beliefs, don't you believe this is fairly dangerous?
Oh, I think it's a lot of beliefs can become very dangerous. I mean, you keep referring to the South. I live in the South. I've got an IQ of about 170. I have a doctor's degree in education. I taught science for 15 years, so I kind of resent the implication that people in the South are dumb. Okay, and I voted for George Bush.
Maybe you do some background on what you just said, and you will find out that there are a few problems with that, with your statement.
Well, yeah, several times you've mentioned tonight that 47% believe in creation.
Okay.
47% believe in a young Earth creation. There's another 35% on top of that believe in creation, but they believe God did it God used evolution, or God did it over millions of years. So we got a total of about 82% of the population of America believes in creation. It's not just 47.
Okay.
There's 47% that believe like me.
Mr. Hovind's question of a couple of minutes ago, which is why is it that people should pay teachers to teach this nonsense about evolution as you consider?
Okay.
Well, see, the answer to that is because we actually want to educate people. Now, what is education about? Education is about teaching, first of all, critical thinking. And so I actually am one of those people in the United States here who advocate a position that is fairly unpopular among educators, which is that there should be discussions of creation and evolution in the classroom, because that's a very good way of having critical thinking. In fact, just a few weeks ago, I finished teaching a course at the University of Tennessee in which one of our guests during an online chat was a leading creationist, Dr. Michael B., who is a biochemist. And my students took that as a great opportunity for critical thinking and try to debunk what this guy was saying. So I don't think that the discussion should be kept out of the classroom. But discussing something is not the same thing as teaching it. Now, what is it that we're supposed to be teaching in the classroom? Well, we're supposed to be teaching the best of what we know until we know it. And if we know better, then we'll change what we're teaching. This is the way education has been going essentially for millennia.
Do we, hang on just a minute. Do we tell kids, because I certainly was never told in school that this is the best that we know so far. I was always taught, like I think a lot of people are in school, this is what it is, this is how it is.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that is absolutely the wrong way to go about it. I think that the education system does require to pay more attention to the ways in which we think we teach people.
Sure.
We teach science, unfortunately, as mostly a bunch of facts, which leaves the whole subject as very dry and very boring for everybody. We don't teach the facts. There are plenty of open questions. After all, by the way, we have a lot of open questions in evolutionary biology, which is why I'm being paid for being a professional evolutionary biologist, because if we knew everything about evolution, then I would be out of a job, right?
Mm.
So obviously there are plenty of things that we don't know, and these are the things that we're trying to find out.
Okay, so listen, you don't object to people being taught about creationism in school?
No, I object to them being taught about it. I don't object, meaning that if you teach it as a fact or is a serious possibility, I object to that because
so how do you
have evidence that didn't happen.
How do you feel in certain schools now in America? And I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm having a go at America.
Well,
but you know, we don't teach this sort of thing in the UK, nor would anybody be able to inflict their views on other people here. But in America, where we think of you having total freedom for everybody, in certain areas you're not even allowed to teach evolutionism now.
Well, the thing is, there's a very interesting distinction between the European way of thinking about these things and the American way of thinking about it. Americans, as you pointed out, like to be free on everything, and they more or less succeed. But in the case of education, the most important thing to consider is that Americans, or a lot of Americans, not everybody, but a lot of Americans think that education is a matter of equality and democracy. That is, if there are different views out there, you have to teach them all, because it's only fair. After all, Mr. Hovind has made this argument several times with me in the past in our debates. He says, well, you know, if the majority of people, or even if a large number of people believe in a certain thing, such as creationism, then since those are the people that pay the taxes to keep the school system going, those views should be heard. Well, a European would never use that kind of argument, because that argument is based on a fundamental flaw. That is that education has got anything to do with democracy. Education is not a democratic process. Education, by definition, is about somebody who knows better than a bunch of other people, and he's going to tell them what he knows because he has studied and he spent a lot of time. It's not true that the kids can be open to, can be exposed to all sorts of wacky ideas and then make up their minds. That's not the way education works. There is a very fine line between critical thinking and just put out there everything that is in there and then says, now go out there in the world and figure it out by yourself. By the same token, we shouldn't teach only creationism. We should be teaching also that the earth is flat, because after all, in the United States, there is a thing called the Flat Earth Society. It's got only a few thousand members, and it's based in California, where we know there are more nutcases than anything else. But on the other hand, they're there. And, why shouldn't they be heard?
Okay.
They
Ken,
pay taxes.
how we agree with this then, Ken?
Well, I'm not a member of the Flat Earth Society. The Bible teaches the Earth is round. The Christians that have read their Bible have never taught the Earth is flat. There may be some people who think the Earth is flat. That's their problem. Dr. Pigliucci said, his statements are very telling if you listen to it carefully. Someone who knows better should get up and teach the kids. Okay, he thinks obviously he knows better because he's getting up and teaching these kids. He has received $650,000 in grants to study evolution. He's been teaching it for many years. I think you said 30, wasn't it, Dr. Pigliucci? How long have you been teaching?
Yeah.
Okay. Could you please tell the people listening tonight, what evidence do you have that any plant or animal has produced a fundamentally different kind? What is your best evidence? And I'd like you to not use the word might have, could have, perhaps, or we think. Just real hard science. You're an expert on this, a well-paid expert. What evidence do you have?
There's plenty of evidence to pick up any
give me,
biology textbooks. The best evidence is in the fossil record, which of course you deny. And there are also some cases of observed origin of new species during the last 100 years. You'll find a list of those in one of the chapters in my latest book.
Okay, let's go one topic at a time now. You said the best evidence is in the fossil record.
Yeah, I would say so.
I'd like to point out, if this was a court of law and you had to prove your case in order to receive grant money to teach this theory to our kids, the fossil record would not be admitted as evidence, because when you find a fossil in the dirt, you don't know that it had any kids. You certainly don't know that it had different kids. Finding a fossil in the dirt is not proof that it's an ancestor to anybody.
And so that only shows to me that you actually don't know anything about science education or science in general.
I understand it real clearly. You still haven't shown me any evidence. What evidence do you have? Give me a specific
What do you want?
fossil.
You want me to create a new species under your nose? That would be a godly thing to do, and I'm certainly not capable of doing that kind of stuff.
Well, I'd like
do
you to tell me, which fossil do you think is the best evidence for evolution?
I just told you.
Give me the name of one particular fossil that's the best evidence.
Oh, one particular fossil. Oh,
sure.
There's so many.
No, just give me one.
How about all the intermediates for the evolution of whales?
Do you believe whales came from an animal like a bear or something on land in 4 legs?
I don't believe. I think, which is something that you have obviously a problem with. You believe a lot of stuff.
Okay, listen, we're going to...
But try to think about the evidence.
Hang on, guys. I'm going to take another commercial break, and we'll come back with more calls on 08700 40 50 60 is the number to ring, and thank you for the emails. With Dr. Kent Hovind, the creation scientist, and Dr. Massimo Pigliucci, who is, of course, an evolution scientist. This evening's show, Dr. Kent Hovind, creation scientist, and Dr. Massimo Pigliucci, who's putting forward the view of evolution. And until recently, I hadn't ever considered that there was really any other choice apart from evolution. And now I find that an enormous amount of people, and we heard, of course, from a guy who phoned in earlier, that all the Muslims believe that God created the world and that this planet is only 6,000 years old. We've also heard from Kent tonight that he believes that there are still dinosaurs in certain parts of the planet, and they're not that old anyway. I'm going to bring in Daniel now, who's phoned in from London. He wants to put the Jewish view. Hi, Daniel.
Yeah, hello. I would say that all religious Jews also believe there's no evolution. It didn't happen. And I'd like to ask the scientist who believes in evolution.
Dr. Massimo.
Dr. Massimo, 40 years ago, the majority of scientists believed that the world was eternal. There was no beginning to the world at all. And they were scientists believing that. And you said that your evidence is that most of the world's scientists believe that the world was 6 billion years old, or however old. And there's so many examples over time that today's science becomes history.
Right. Can I answer?
Yep.
Okay. Well, yes, you're absolutely right, and that is exactly the difference between a science and a religion. I think I pointed out several times tonight that, yes, scientists can be wrong, scientists have been wrong in the past, and surely scientists will be wrong in the future. Will they be wrong about evolution in particular? I don't know. I don't honestly think so, but it is a possibility. But that is the nature of science. Science is about proposing reasonable hypothesis to explain what we know about the universe. And when the more we know about the universe and about nature, and the more some of these ideas are going to be confirmed, and some of these ideas are going to be thrown away and replaced with new ones. I mean, that is the process of science. Unfortunately, we do a terrible job as educators to explain this to the public, and especially to students in schools. We explain things, not me personally, I try to avoid that, but a lot of people, unfortunately, and certainly a lot of textbooks are written in a way that makes it science things come across as this monolithic, unchanging body of evidence. That's not what science is about. That's a religion. If you want to believe something and never change your mind, then you pick up any religion that you like and you start believing in whatever they say, and you'll never change your mind, no matter what the evidence is. Science is about changing our minds now. The problem is, well, since scientists have been wrong in the past, can I trust what they're saying now? Nobody's asking here to trust what the scientists are saying without questioning. I'm not suggesting that scientists shouldn't be questioned, especially when it comes down to practical things. We all know that scientists have made pretty egregious mistakes about practical things. The mad cow disease, for one, was one of those. Now, the question is, however, who else are you going to trust? What other option you have? What better option do you have? Well, frankly, if I have questions concerning the nature of the world, medicine or biology or physics or chemistry, I'm going to ask a medical doctor, a biologist, a chemist, or a physicist. They may be wrong, but they're much less likely to be wrong than, the first guy down the road who thinks that he has all the answers because he's read them in the Bible. That's all. So you don't get a definitive answer. You just get the best answer that we have available at this point. The fact that it's not perfect, it's just part of the game, and we have to live with it.
Daniel?
Yeah, I'd like to say why I think that that most of the scientists are wrong. I think it's actually Maimonides said this hundreds of years ago. Said that in Jewish law, a judge is not allowed to take a bribe and say it's not going to affect me. I'm going to judge normally. I'm not going to favour this guy because even subconsciously he's already thinking because he's got this money he's going to favour this guy. Similarly, I think that people think there is that evolution has happened because they don't want to believe that there's a God. Because if there's a God, it automatically creates responsibilities for them. They have to do moral things, and they don't want to have that. And they know that if there's no God, then they don't have to have any morals, and therefore they create these theories of evolution that it will happen by accident. They create a time history of the world that would allow evolution to take place. I don't believe it could take place even in that time, but they create that so that...
So when you were taught at school about the evolution, dinosaurs, cavemen, all that sort of stuff, you didn't believe it, or you weren't taught that at school?
I was taught that the theory existed. I wasn't taught that it was true.
Okay. Daniel, thank you.
I very much resent the fact, the implication that because somebody believes in evolution or accepts the theory of evolution, then he's got no morals. In fact, I even resent the implication that because somebody doesn't believe in a God, he's got no morals.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty upset that we are all considered, if we don't believe that God created the world in 6 days or whatever it was, that we are blasphemous.
Yeah, that's right. But the question is, the implication is...
I mean, hang on, I tell you, Massimo, I would love to believe this. And earlier on this last year, I had cancer. And I was considering my own demise at the time, and I was lying in a hospital bed at some point, and I was saying, listen, if there is a God, I'd like to know now, and etc. I mean, everybody does it when they get to that situation. Maybe I wasn't being honest enough, but I believe there is something that we don't understand. I'm just trying to fight to understand it. I mean, if it was as simple as Kent is saying, because I think, people who have this great belief and this great faith have a certain peace of mind that I would certainly like to have.
I completely agree with you. And the question about morality is a very important question, but usually the way it is put, it simply ignores the evidence. For one thing...
I can't claim to be a very moral person, though, so I'm a sinner.
There is a large number of people who are atheists, or there is a large number of people who are believers, but they accept evolution, and they carry out perfectly normal and moral lives. In fact, they are among the nicest people and most helpful people that I know. There's a lot of them. And so it's simply nonsense to say that if you don't believe in the literal interpretation of the Bible, or if you don't believe in a God, you're going to be going around raping and killing people. This is just not, it doesn't happen.
What worries me...
Furthermore, we've been throwing around statistics all over the place during this broadcast. Well, let me throw you one little interesting statistic. I'm being a little facetious, but the statistics is correct. 99% of the inmates in American prisons are Christians. So should I conclude that believing in the Christian God leads you to a life of perdition and criminality? Of course not. It just means that regardless of what particular religion people believe, they're going to be good or bad, and they're going to be doing wrong things or right things.
Let me tell you both the thing that has left me with the most surprise about our encounter this evening. And that is that there is no definite evidence that you can bring, Massimo, or that I could give, or anybody else can give, that Kent isn't right. That there is no conclusive evidence that this planet didn't start 6,000 years ago. When most right-minding scientists will tell us it's everybody thought now, we're billions of years old. This rock took billions of years to get here. We have found stuff buried that we can date back millions of years. And I just took that as something that was right and definite. But there's no...
Hold on a second, Will. Let me make one short comment about this. When I said that is true, that you cannot falsify what Mr. Hovind is saying, I also explained why you cannot, under what conditions. That is, all the evidence does point to the fact that the conclusive, overwhelmingly points to the fact that the Earth is much older than 6,000 years old. The only way you can believe that the Earth is in fact only 6,000 years old is if you assume that God is such a devilish little guy that put everything in the wrong place to try to fool us into thinking otherwise. That is something that there's no way anybody can disprove, because, then anything that I come up with, Mr. Hovind to come out and say, well, but God did it that way. And why did God do it that way? Well, because he wanted to do it that way.
Kent?
Well, I think it's about my turn. You guys have been talking a long time here. First place, according to the Washington Times, August 31st, 1998, 55% of the U.S. scientists believe in Darwinian evolution. Only 55%. It is not all scientists that believe in Darwinian evolution. Secondly, he says there is no evidence that points to the Earth not being, that the Earth is not billions of years old. This is simply not true. He's welcome to believe that if he wants. But if you'd write a couple of numbers down and draw yourself a little graph, this year there are 6 billion people on the planet. In 1985, there were 5 billion. In 1800, there were 1 billion people on the planet. In the year 0, when Christ was here, there was only 1/4 billion. Draw yourself a little graph with those numbers, and you'll find it points to the whole population of the Earth starting about 4,400 years ago. That's when the Bible says there was a flood that destroyed the world 4,400 years ago. Noah and his family, 8 people, survived on a boat, and they started repopulating the world. And if you start with 8 people in 4,400 years, you can easily generate the current population of the world. So those who want to believe that man has been here for 3 million years, since Australopithecines or something, which, by the way, Charles Oxnard from England studied Lucy more than anybody. After studying all the bones, he said, look, folks, this is not a missing link. This is an unusual monkey is all it is. It's a chimpanzee, 3 feet tall. And so if you want to believe that's a missing link, you're welcome to believe that, but that's not science. That's back into your metaphysics. So the arguments that I think it's overwhelming evidence that this world was destroyed by a flood, the fact that we have fossils at all proves there was a flood. Millions of buffalo were slaughtered out west in the last 100 years to try to subdue the Indians, and you can't find any fossilized buffalo. They didn't fossilize because they weren't buried, and yet we find trillions of fossils all over the world. Finding fossils is not a problem. Finding missing links is the problem. The fossils, oftentimes, it's not just trees. Oftentimes, animal fossils go from one